The food in his hands, the marketplace, was loud and full of color. Merchants shouted, selling fruits, spices, and cloth under glowing lanterns. But in the middle of all that noise, two small figures sat quietly against a wall. They were twins alien. Children with thin arms, large golden eyes, and fur that was tangled and dirty. Their clothes were torn, barely enough to keep the cold away. They did not speak. They only watched. Every time someone passed, they looked up with a spark of hope. But it died just as quickly when the person walked away without even glancing. At them, the smell of roasted bread and hot soup drifted from a nearby stall. The twins' stomachs made a low, painful sound. A tea. They tried to ignore it. They had learned a long time ago that hunger could not always be beaten. Then, a shadow stopped in front of them. It was a man taller than most around him, skin pale compared to the locals wearing a dark jacket. A human. His name was Evan. He was new to this planet, here for work and trade. Evan's eyes lowered to the two small figures. At first, he thought they were resting. But when he saw the way their eyes followed the food stalls, the truth hit him: they were starving. From behind, a vendor called out, "Don't waste your time. Those two are trouble. Street rats. Best to leave them." Evan ignored the voice. He crouched down so he could see them better. "Hey," he said gently. "When was the last time you ate?" The twins didn't answer. The boy looked down. The girl stared at him, her eyes both cautious and curious. Evan reached into the bag he had just bought from a stall, pulled out a warm piece of bread, still steaming. The smell was rich and fresh. The girl's eyes widened. The boy's nostrils flared, but neither moved. "It's for you," Evan said. His voice was calm, patient. "Go on. It's safe." Around them, people slowed their steps, watching. Some shook their heads. Others whispered. A few looked disgusted. One merchant muttered, "Humans don't understand. Once you feed them, they'll never leave you alone." Evan didn't care. He tore the bread in half and held out the bigger piece toward the girl. Slowly, she reached out, her small hand shaking. The boy followed, taking the other half. They hesitated one more time, then bit into it. The first taste made them eat faster, like they were afraid someone would snatch it away. Their little jaws worked quickly, crumbs falling onto their knees. "Easy," Evan said, his voice soft. "You'll choke if you rush." They slowed down just a little, but their eyes stayed on the bread, as if it was the most precious thing in the world. When they finished, Evan pulled out a second piece. This time, they didn't hesitate. They took it quickly, their hunger too strong for pride. He sat there with them for a while, ignoring the cold looks from others. "What are your names?" he asked. The girl swallowed, then said quietly, "Lyra." The boy spoke next, his voice rough from silence. Evan nodded. "I'm Evan." They didn't thank him with words. They didn't have to. The way they looked at him like no one had ever done something kind for them before said enough. When the bread was gone, Evan stood up. He still had errands to finish, but something inside him didn't want to walk away. He looked at the twins again. "You two stay warm," he said, pulling two small packets from his bag and placing them on the ground. Inside was more bread and a little dried fruit as he walked away. He felt their eyes following him. Minutes later, while he was buying supplies, he turned and saw them again. They were still there, but now they were eating the fruit carefully, as if trying to make it last. The vendor beside him shook his head. "You've made a mistake. Kindness is wasted on them." Evan didn't answer, because deep down he felt something strange, like this small act wasn't over yet. Like the story between him and those two starving children had only just begun. And he was right. The first meal, the night air was colder than Evan expected. He had finished his shopping, But his mind kept returning to the two small faces he had seen in the market. He told himself they would be fine, someone else would help them. But deep down, he knew the truth. No one had helped them before. Why? Would tonight be any different? When he walked past the alley near the market's edge, he saw them again. Lyra and Kay were sitting under a torn piece of cloth they had hung like a weak shelter. The fruit he had given them was gone. Their knees were drawn up to their chests for warmth. Evan sighed and stepped closer. "Hey," he said softly, both heads lifted. Their eyes were wary, but not as fearful as before. "Come on," he said. "You can't stay out here tonight." They didn't move. The boy, Kay, glanced at his sister. Lyra's hands clutched a string around her neck as if it was something. "Precious Dot," Evan crouched down. "I know you don't trust me yet, but I'm going to get you a proper meal. Warm food, no tricks." Slowly, Lyra stood up. Kay followed, staying close to her side. They walked through dim streets until they reached a small diner on the corner. The smell of grilled meat and spiced broth filled the air. Inside, soft yellow lights glowed against wooden walls. The owner, an older alien woman with gray-blue skin, looked up as they entered. Her eyes narrowed. "They're not welcome here," she said sharply, pointing at the twins. "They're with me," Evan replied, his voice calm but firm. The woman hesitated, then sighed. "Fine, but sit in the back." Evan led Lyra and Kay to a corner table far from the other customers. They slid into the seat, their bodies stiff as if expecting to be thrown out any second. He handed them menus, but they only stared at the pictures like they were looking at another world. "What do you like?" Evan asked. They exchanged glances. Lyra whispered, "Anything." "Warm?" Evan smiled slightly. "Warm it is." He ordered a big pot of soup, fresh bread, and roasted vegetables. When the food arrived, the twins' eyes went wide. Steam curled into the air, carrying a rich scent of herbs. "Go ahead," he said. They ate slowly at first, as if unsure if it was truly theirs. Then the pace quickened. Kay's cheeks puffed as he tried to chew faster, and Lyra kept glancing at Evan as though making sure he wasn't going to take it away. He poured them each a cup of hot tea. They both sipped, and for the first time, a tiny smile touched Lyra's lips. "You like it?" he asked. She nodded, the warmth softening her guarded expression. Halfway through the meal, Evan noticed something whenever a customer walked to. Close to their table, both twins froze, their hands covering their plates. It was a reflex born from too many stolen meals. Evan leaned in. "No one's taking your food here, not while I'm with you." Kay looked at him for a long moment before nodding slowly. When they were finally full, they leaned back against the seat, their eyelids heavy. For children their age, they seemed far too used to exhaustion. The diner owner approached to clear the table. "You're going to have trouble," she murmured to Evan. "Those kids, they've been marked. Best to keep your distance." Evan's jaw tightened. "They're just children." The woman shook her head and walked away. Outside, the wind cut through the streets, carrying the smell of rain. The twins followed him closely, their steps almost silent. When they reached his rented room in a narrow building, he stopped. "You can stay here tonight," he said, unlocking the door. Inside was a smaller bed, a chair, and a little heater in the corner. He tossed a blanket on the floor and set the heater near it. Lyra and Kay didn't move at first. Then, without a word, they curled up together under the blanket. "Good night," Evan said quietly. They didn't reply, but before closing their eyes, Lyra gave him a single, searching looks if trying to decide if this human could be trusted. When they finally drifted to sleep, their breathing steady, Evan sat by the window and stared into the rainy night. He had only planned to feed them once, just to make sure they made it through the day. But something told him this wasn't going to end here. Something about those twins had already anchored itself in his heart. And tomorrow, the real trouble might begin. The alley confrontation the next. Morning, the rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet. The sun's pale light reflected in the puddles, making the city look cleaner than it really was. Evan stepped outside to get breakfast for himself and the twins. He told them to stay in the room until he came back. They nodded, though Lyra's eyes followed him until the door shut. The market was starting to fill with vendors. He bought fresh bread, dried fruit, and a jug of warm milk. It wasn't much, but he knew the twins would be happy. As he turned into the narrow street toward his room, he heard shouting, children's voices, but not in play. His pace quickened. At the end of the alley near his building, he saw them. Lyra and Kay backed against a wall. 3 older alien boys surrounded them. Their clothes were better, their faces smug. One of the boys had Lyra's bread in his hand. Another was yanking at the necklace around her neck, the same one she had clutched last night. Give it here. Rat. The boy sneered. KY tried to push him away, but the bigger boy shoved him to the ground. Hey. Evan's voice boomed across the alley. The boys froze for a moment, then turned to see him striding toward them. A tall human with a bag in one hand and anger in his eyes. Get away from them, he said, his voice low but firm. The tallest boy, clearly the leader, smirked. Who are you? Their new owner. I don't own anyone, Evan said, stepping closer, and neither do you. Now leave. The boy's smirk faded, but he didn't move. You don't know who they belong to, human. You'll regret touching what's not yours. They belong to no one, Evan said sharply. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then the leader spat on the ground. You'll regret this, he said again. Before signaling the others, they shoved Lyra's bread to the ground and walked off, muttering. Evan knelt by Kay, helping him up. You okay? Kay nodded, though his jaw was tight. Lyra clutched her necklace, shaking. What happened? Evan asked. They always take from us, Lyra whispered. If we fight back, they tell. Them. Evan frowned. Them, she didn't answer, just looked down. He picked up the bread, brushed it off, and handed it back to her. Come on, he said. Let's go inside. Back in the room, Evan set the bag on the table. The twins ate in silence, glancing at the door every time a sound came from outside. After breakfast, Evan leaned back in his chair. You two can't stay here forever. Who are these boys working for? Kay's voice was quiet. The family, the ones who he stopped. His sister's hand on his arm. Evan didn't press further. He knew pushing them too soon would only shut them down. But inside, his curiosity and anger grew. By midday, he took them for a walk. He wanted them to see they could move through the streets without hiding behind walls. At a small fruit stall, he let them pick what they liked. That's when he noticed someone watching from across the street. A man in dark clothes, tall, with a symbol embroidered on his sleeve. The moment Evan looked at him, the man turned and melted into the crowd. Evan didn't mention it to the twins, but he kept them close the rest of the day. That evening, he bought dinner from the diner again. The owner gave him a strange look. You're still with them? She asked. Yes, Evan replied simply. The woman shook her head. You're brave, or foolish. After the meal, the twins curled up in their blanket as the heater hummed softly. Evan sat by the window, staring out at the dark streets. His instincts told him trouble was coming. The boys in the alley weren't acting alone. And whoever the family was, they clearly had power over this city's people. He looked over at Lyra and Kay, small, fragile, and far too quiet for children their age. He had no plan yet. But he knew one thing: if trouble came for them again, he wouldn't just stand by, and next time, he might not just be facing street bullies. The past no one talks about the next morning. Evan left the twins sleeping under the blanket and stepped outside to clear his head. He couldn't stop thinking about the words from the alley. You don't know who they belong to. He needed answers. The market was alive with voices, but Evan wasn't shopping this time. He was looking for someone who would talk. Finally, he spotted Marek, a trader he had met his first week on the planet. Marek was an older alien with kind eyes and a sharp mind. If anyone knew the truth, it would be him. Marek, Evan greeted. The trader smiled faintly. Back so soon? What do you need, human? Evan hesitated. Information about 2 children. Twins, Lyra and Kay. The smile faded from Marek's face. He looked around, lowering his voice. You've taken them in, haven't you? Yes, Evan admitted. And people keep warning me. I need to know why. Marek sighed heavily. There are stories. Things most people prefer not to speak of. Their parents once worked for the Dralvek family, wealthy, powerful, dangerous. The kind who control half the city without ever showing their faces. Evan crossed his arms. What happened? They were accused of stealing from the family. No trial, no proof. Just an accusation. And the parents were killed in the street. Marek's voice hardened. The children were spared, but marked as cursed blood. Anyone who helps them risks becoming an enemy of the Dralviks. Evan felt a cold anger rise inside him. So that's it? Everyone just abandoned them. Marek nodded slowly. Fear is a strong leash, my friend. Even I. He stopped, glancing at the nearby crowd. Even I would be careful speaking of this. Evan's jaw tightened. Then I guess I'm already in trouble. He left the market with his mind heavy. The pieces fit, now the glares, the whispers, the boys in the alley. This wasn't just about 2 starving kids. This was about power and fear. Back at the room, the twins were awake. Lyra sat by the small window, staring at the street below. Kay was carefully folding the blanket they had used. You left, Lyra said softly, not accusing, just stating. A fact. I came back, Evan replied. And I learned something. The twins exchanged a glance. You don't have to tell me everything now, he continued, sitting on the chair. But I know about your parents. Kay's hands froze. Lyra's eyes lowered. They were good people, Lyra whispered. My father fixed machines. My mother worked in the family kitchens. They said we would have a safe home forever. She stopped, her voice breaking. Kay clenched his fists. Then one night, soldiers came. They took our parents outside. We heard it happen. Evan's throat felt tight. I'm sorry. Lyra nodded slowly. After that, no one would touch us. They say our family is cursed. That helping us will bring death. That's just fear, Evan said firmly. It's not a curse. But the way the twins looked at him told him they had heard those words too many times to believe otherwise. Later that day, Evan took them to the park at the edge of the city. The air was fresher there, and the sound of running water from a nearby fountain filled the silence. The twins sat on a bench, nibbling on small rolls he had brought. Lyra's gaze stayed on the fountain. Why are you helping us? She asked. Finally, Evan thought about it. Because you needed help. Because you're children. Because someone should have stepped in a long time ago. Kay tilted his head. And you're not afraid of the family? Evan gave a small smile. Not enough to leave you. For the first time, Lyra's eyes softened in a way that wasn't just gratitude. It was something warmer. Something like trust trying to grow. But that fragile moment didn't last long. As they walked back toward the city center, Evan noticed a figure leaning against a wall, a tall alien man in dark clothes, the same one he had seen watching them before. This time, the man didn't look away. Instead, he smiled faintly and tapped. The emblem on his sleeve, silver symbol of a coiled serpent. The Dralvek family's mark. Evan kept walking, his body tense. The twins stayed close, sensing his unease. Back in the safety of the room, Lyra finally spoke. "You saw him, didn't you?" Evan nodded. Kye single quotes' voice was small. "They know about you now." Evan looked at them both. "Then we make a plan. We don't wait for them to come to us." For a moment, the room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the heater. Evan knew what Merrick had said: fear is a strong leash. But Evan had never been one to wear a leash, and if the Dralviks thought they could scare him into giving up the twins, they were about to learn how wrong they were. The threat arrives. The next 2 days passed in uneasy silence. Evan kept the twins inside most of the time, only going out to buy food or basic supplies. Whenever he returned, he scanned the streets first, looking for anyone watching. But by the third evening, trouble came to them. It started with a loud knock on the door. Not the polite kind. This was sharp, heavy, and deliberate. Evan froze for half a second, then moved quickly to block the twins behind him. Another knock, harder this time. "Stay quiet," he whispered. From the other side, a deep voice called, "Open the door, human. We need to talk." Evan's hand tightened on the small folding knife in his pocket. "Who are you?" "We're here for the children," the voice said plainly. "They belong to the Dralvik family. You've been keeping what's theirs." Evan's jaw clenched. "They're not anyone's property." The voice chuckled darkly. "Everything in this city belongs to someone. Open the door now, or we come in." The twins pressed closer to him. Lyra's fingers gripped his jacket tightly. Kay's breathing was fast and shallow. Evan took a slow breath, then unlocked the door not to invite them in, but to face them. Outside stood 3 men. All wore the serpent emblem on their sleeves. The one in front was tall and broad, his skin marked with deep scars. He looked Evan up and down, his expression almost amused. "So you're the human who thinks he can play hero?" The man said. "I'm the man telling you to leave these kids alone." Evan replied evenly. The scarred man smirked. "Do you know? How many people have said that before? They're all gone now. Dead, disappeared, doesn't matter. You'll join them if you don't step aside." "I'm not stepping aside," Evan said, his voice low but firm. The man's eyes narrowed. "You've been warned." He turned to leave, but before he did, he looked over his shoulder at Evan. "We'll be back. And when we return, we won't knock." The 3 walked away into the shadows, their boots echoing on the wet pavement. Evan shut the door and locked it again, but the tension in the room stayed thick. Kay was the first to speak. "They'll take us if they come back." "Not if I'm here," Evan said. Lyra looked at him. "You don't understand. Tay don't give up. If they want something, they'll keep coming until they get it." Evan crouched down so he was at their eye level. "Then we make it so they can't find you. We're not staying here anymore." The twins exchanged a glance, half fear, half hope. That night, Evan stayed awake, making a plan. He knew the Dralvik family wouldn't wait long before trying again. And next time, they wouldn't just threaten. They'd act. In the early hours, he began packing what little they had: a few clothes, food packets, the small heater, and a blanket. Everything had to fit in one bag. At sunrise, he told the twins, "We're leaving tonight. Somewhere they can't follow." But he knew leaving wouldn't be simple. The Dralviks controlled the ports, the train stations, even the main road out of the city. Escaping would mean finding a hidden way out, something risky and dangerous. Later that day, he went to see Marek again. The traitor listened quietly as Evan explained what happened. "You've got no more time," Marek said. "If they know where you are, you must vanish. There's an old cargo route under the city. Smugglers still use it, but it's dangerous. Need someone who knows the path." "I'll take dangerous over letting them be taken," Evan replied. Marek nodded slowly. I know a man. I'll contact him. By the time Evan returned to the room, the twins were sitting close together, holding a small pouch between them. Inside were a few trinkets, a carved wooden bird, a piece of ribbon, and a tiny metal ring. These are all we have left, Lyra said quietly. From our parents. Evan looked at the items, then at their faces. Then we make sure you keep them, no matter what. That night, the streets outside seemed too quiet. Evan sat by the window, watching for movement. Every shadow looked like a threat. And then he saw them, two men in dark coats, walking slowly down the street, looking at every door. They didn't knock this time. They were searching. Evan stepped away from the window, his voice calm but urgent. Time to go. The twins didn't ask questions. They just grabbed their small pouch and followed him into the night. They had no idea what waited in the darkness ahead, but staying was no longer an option. The escape plan, the night air, felt heavier than usual. Every step Evan took seemed louder than it should. The twins followed close behind, their small feet almost silent on the wet ground. They stayed in the shadows, avoiding the main streets. The Dralvik men were out there, and Evan knew they would be watching every exit from the city. They reached the back door of Marek's shop. The old trader was waiting, a dim lantern in his hand. You're late? Marek whispered. We had to take the long way, Evan replied. Is your man here? From the darkness behind Marek stepped another figure, short, wiry alien with quick eyes and a thin smile. This is Roan, Marek said. He knows the old cargo tunnels. If you follow him, you might just make it out. Roan tilted his head toward the twins. They're small. That'll help, but you'll have to move fast. The tunnels aren't safe. Evan glanced down at Lyra and Kay. You hear that? No stopping. They both nodded, though Evan could see the fear in their faces. Roan led them through narrow alleys until they reached a locked metal hatch half hidden behind a pile of crates. He produced a small tool and popped the lock in seconds. Let's smell. Of damp stone and rust rose from the darkness below. This way, Roan said, climbing down a ladder. Evan helped Lyra first, then Kay, before following. The hatch closed above them, cutting off the light. The only glow came from Roan's small handheld lamp. The tunnel was narrow, with walls dripping water and a low ceiling that forced Evan to duck. Pipes ran along one side, hissing softly. There, footsteps echoed. Where does this lead? Evan asked quietly. An old freight yard outside the city walls, Roan replied. From there, you can catch a cargo hauler heading anywhere. The Dralviks won't risk sending their men that far from their territory. They moved quickly, but every few minutes Roan would stop and listen. Voices, he whispered once, motioning them to press against the wall. Two shadowy figures passed in the distance, their lanterns swinging. Smugglers when the coast was clear. They kept going. Halfway through the tunnel, they came to a section where the floor was flooded. The water was cold, rising almost to the twins' knees. They shivered, but didn't complain. Keep moving, Evan urged, his hands steadying them. Finally, the tunnel began to slope upward. Roan stopped at a rusted gate. We're close, he said, prying it open. They stepped into a wide chamber filled with old crates and broken machinery. A faint breeze carried the smell of fresh air from somewhere above. That ladder leads to the yard, Roan said, pointing. Once you're up there, stay low and head for the far wall. There's a gap in the fence big enough for the kids. You'll find a freight hauler waiting on the other side if you're fast. Evan nodded. Thank you. Roan gave him a long look. The Dralviks, they don't forget. Even if you escape, they might come after you one day. I'll be ready, Evan said. The twins went up first, Lyra carrying their small pouch of belongings. Kay climbed after her, his hands trembling slightly on the rungs. Evan followed, pushing the hatch above them open just enough to look out. The yard was dark, lit only by a few flickering lamps. Rows of abandoned cargo containers stood like silent giants. Somewhere in the distance, a low-engine hum signaled. A vehicle idling. "Go," Evan whispered. They ran, weaving between the containers. Every shadow looked like an enemy waiting to strike. Then a shout dot figures emerged from the far side of the yard, moving fast. The glint of the serpent emblem. It was clear even in the dim light. "They found us," Lyra gasped. "Keep going," Evan urged, scooping Kay up and pulling Lyra along. They reached the far wall. As Roan had promised, there was a narrow gap in the fence. Lyra squeezed through first, then Kay. Evan was halfway through when a hand grabbed his jacket from behind. He twisted hard, breaking free, and rolled out onto the dirt beyond the fence. The twins clung to his arms as they ran toward the waiting freight hauler. The driver, a grizzled alien with a heavy coat, shouted, "Get in." They scrambled into the back of the truck just as the Dralvek men reached the fence. The engine roared, and the vehicle lurched forward into the darkness beyond the city. Evan held the twins close as the city lights faded behind them. They weren't safe yet, but for the first time in days, there was a chance. Chosen as family, the freight hauler rattled over uneven ground, its engine growling in the cold night air. Inside the dim cargo bay, Evan sat with his back against a crate. The twins huddled close on either side. They had been riding for nearly an hour. The city lights were long gone, replaced by the dark outline of hills under a star-filled sky. Lyra's head rested against his arm. Kay's small fingers clutched the edge of Evan's jacket as if letting go might pull him back into danger. "You're safe now," Evan murmured, though part of him knew it was too early to promise that. The Dralvek family didn't give up easily. The driver's voice called from the front, muffled through the metal wall. "We'll stop soon. Can't risk being seen on the main road." Evan nodded, even though the driver couldn't see him. "All right." When the truck finally slowed and rolled to a stop, the doors opened with a groan. Cold air swept in, carrying the smell of pine and fresh soil. They were in a clearing surrounded by tall trees. Somewhere in the distance, water rushed over Roxa. "River, this is as far as I go," the driver said. "There's a small village west of here. No Dralvek influence. You can rest there." Evan helped the twins down from the truck. "Thank you," he said. The driver gave him a sharp nod before closing the doors and driving off into the night. For a moment, the three of them stood in silence, the forest around them whispering with the wind. Evan knelt down so he was eye level. "With them, it's a long walk to the village, but once we get there, we can get warm, have a meal, and sleep in real beds." Lyra tilted her head, and after that, Evan hesitated. "After that, we'll decide where to go next." Kay's voice was small. "Will you be there?" "Of course," Evan said.
Ow!
"I told you I'm not leaving you."
Ow!
They started. Walking through the forest, the moonlight guiding their steps. The path was rough, but the sound of the river made it easier to follow. Evan carried Kay on his shoulders for part of the way, while Lyra walked beside him, holding the strap of his bag. When they reached the village, it was quiet, just a handful of stone houses with faint light in the windows. Evan found a small inn and knocked softly. An older woman opened the door, her eyes widening at the sight of the twins. "They've been walking a long time," Evan said. "We need a place for the night." She studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in, you're welcome here." Inside, the warmth of a fire wrapped around them like a blanket. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. The woman brought them bowls of stew, and the twins ate slowly this time, no longer afraid it would be taken away. After they finished, the woman led them to a small room with 2 beds. Evan sat on the edge of one, rubbing the tiredness from his eyes. He had been running on instinct for days. And now that they were safe at least for the night, the exhaustion hit him hard. Lyra stood by the door, watching him. "You really don't have to stay with us," she said quietly. Evan looked at her in surprise. "Why would I leave?" "Because that's what people do," she said. "They help, a little. Then they go back to their own lives." Kay was sitting on the other bed, swinging his feet. "If you go, we'll be alone again." Evan leaned forward, his voice firm but gentle. "Listen to me. I didn't feed you in that marketplace just to walk away later. I didn't pull you out of that yard so you could go back to hiding. I'm here because I choose to be, and if you'll have me, I'll be your family." The twins froze for a moment, as if they didn't quite believe it. Then Lyra stepped forward and hugged him tight. Fierce, almost desperate. Kay joined a second later, wrapping his arms around both of them. "You're ours now," Lyra whispered. "And we're yours," Kay added. Evan closed his eyes, holding them close. The weight of the past few days, the fear, the running, the danger seemed lighter now. He hadn't planned on this when he first knelt down in that market with bread in his hands. But somehow, these two small lives had become his responsibility. And his home. That night, the twins fell asleep in the same bed, curled together under thick blankets. Evan sat in the chair by the window, watching the stars through the glass. Somewhere out there, the Dralvec family still ruled over the city they had fled. Maybe one day they would come looking. But if they did, Evan would be ready, because now, he wasn't just a man helping strangers. He was a father by choice, by promise, and by the quiet, unbreakable bond of a meal shared when no one else would give one.